Before I start, I would like to Elena Congratulansah, who is a professor here at the school and director of the institution that sponsored this event. I would like you to give some few words of welcome to all of us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Good morning to everyone. I'm really glad to welcome you here in the frame of this seminar, which in fact takes place within the activities of the doctorate program in architecture and sciences of the city. And maybe just some words on this program. It is constituted by 80 PhD students. And they are, in fact, representatives of a wide range of disciplines, because it goes from theory of architecture, architectural and urban design, heritage, experimentation on materials, robotics, and sociology, demography, urban demography, in fact, more precisely. And so you can really imagine how challenging is to, in a sense, accompany the PhD students to an education to scientificity, or what is scientific, what is a scientific assertion and scientific research, for sure, no, within this various landscape of disciplines. And this is the reason why I'm very happy that started from anyway yesterday, so the lab of theory of the project of domestic space is now, in fact, fully active in contributing to the scientific conversation that, in fact, is the practice, the fundamental practice of your education as scholars. And this is what is really fundamental. So I'm very happy for that. I'm very happy for really the quality of presentation that I have listened yesterday. So the intensity and the accuracy of the debates also. So thank you very much to all the audience. And finally, I'm also very happy for the sort of qualitative bundle, massive bundle of scholars, of senior scholars that are today lecturing here. So I'm very happy and good energy for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Thanks a lot for your words of welcome. So I will keep my presentation very, very short. So I will not have any slides, also because today you will see a lot of slides. So I thought that maybe I should not add another PowerPoint presentation. So welcome to the symposium on the Fifth Typology. And of course, I will explain in a minute what we mean by Fifth Typology, but essentially is a symposium on type and the discourse around type, which we can call typology. Before I start introducing the thesis of this symposium, I just want to say that this is, as Elena was just mentioning, the inaugural event of TPOD. TPOD is an acronym that stands for Theory and Project of Domestic Space. Here in the school, we have to choose an acronym for our labs. All the one that I proposed to our secretary didn't succeed. So this was actually her decision. So anyway, sounds good, apparently. So it's fine. But actually, it's a lab that focuses really on the history and theory of domestic space. And of course, domestic space understood not as just the house or housing, but really as the very large project of human domestication, which is one of the most important but also controversial historical event in the history of our species. And before I start, I would like to mention the people who are part of this lab. Of course, myself, Pier Vittorio Aureli, Sylvie Clavel, who is actually our administrative collaborator, Emerson Corby, Yolanda De Valle, Teodora Giovanazzi, and Constantine Marcoux. So I'm very grateful to them because it's actually because of their effort that this event could take place in the best conditions. So thank you very much to my collaborators. I also want to thank Gregoire, Rita, and Juliana for taking care of the audio-visual recording of this event. Of course, the idea is that we will record everything for future memory, but also we would like to post online the lectures later on with your consent, of course. So I hope I've not forgot anything from a kind of introductory point of view. Now, I think I can spend a few words about the symposium. Why a symposium on type? But first of all, I think it's fair to give a very concise definition of what we mean by type. And of course, the best way to do so is to still refer to the classic definition by Quatremer de Cancy. Type is not a model to be copied, but is actually the structure of things, the structure of through which buildings, in a way, comes together. So in a way, typological reading, but also typological design imply the fact that imply actually the possibility of reading buildings structurally through, let's say, something that we cannot actually experience just with their image. And the reason why we decided to open up this discussion on type is that we believe at TPOD that in a way type is still a very useful framework to study and to a certain extent also teach the project of architecture. Of course, this claim needs a little bit of a historical context. I mentioned this also yesterday, but I think it's useful also to repeat this today. And of course, sorry for basing this on my own direct experience. When I started to study architecture in the early 90s, I studied at the UAV, the School of Architecture in Venice. Perhaps I didn't know at the time that I belonged to the very last generation that was educated through the concept of type. It was a very strong category that all professors in my school used to introduce us to architecture. Of course, Aldo Rossi, but especially Carlo Aimonino's work on type was looming large in this pedagogy. And I have to say that with all its limitations and problems, I thought that it was a very good introduction to architecture. Of course, full of assumptions that one could debate and question. But I cannot really think of a better introduction to architecture. Then in the mid-90s, late 90s, things changed. The UAV, all of a sudden, there was a change of, you could say, zeitgeist or influence. So architects such as Rancolas, Frank Gehry were on the rise. And overnight, the discourse on type disappeared. So actually, overnight we just trash all our books and notes around the discussion on type. So it was considered very outdated, let's say, way to look and discuss architecture. Typology was considered, in fact, mostly a discourse on norms and rules and the inheritance of traditional models. And of course, this kind of new wave that emerged in the 90s with later on the Super Dutch and all the, let's say, things that maybe my generation still remember. Typology actually was considered a very outdated discourse on architecture. And then things actually changed, I would say, maybe 10, 12, 15 years ago, when, in our opinion, or in my opinion, there has been a return to the importance or discourse on type. And I'm really happy that today we have two persons that I think represents this return on the discourse on type. There is Lee and Christoph Gantenbein from Christian Gantenbein, because for me they represent, maybe I'm wrong, so I'm you could argue back in your lecture if this is true or not, but to me actually their work, which was not only design but really a research on type, in a way was a kind of return to this discussion on type, and I felt that this was an important contribution to the discourse of architecture in the last 10 years. Actually, I will now also put more in context this kind of return to typology. Now, why the fifth typology? Why we use this title? Well, you know that in the late 70s, Anthony Vidler wrote a very important essay called The Third Typology. And in this essay, Vidler was taking stock of the way in which architects have discussed or used the concept of typology. The first, the discovery of this concept, of course, typology and type is a way of thinking and doing architecture that dates back to immemorial time. But the discourse on typology, the first emergence of this discourse dates back in the 18th century with the Enlightenment, and with the possibility to classify, analyze architecture in terms of their building structures, building systems, but also programs. And of course, the work of Quatremer was very influential, but also the work of architects and educators such as Durand was very much instrumental to consolidate a kind of typological analysis or discourse on architecture. The second typology was the work of the modern movement, and especially the attempt to fine-tune the production of architecture to industrialization. So in a way, type and typology were an attempt to transcend the authorship of the single architect and to really consider the design of architecture as a industrial, as a form of mass production in a way. But then the third typology, the one that Vidler in his article was championing in the late 70s, was somehow a return to type, but understood no longer as a framework for the mass production, let's say, of architecture, but type as an instrument of research that, as actually Yolanda de Valle was explaining to us yesterday, had a very strong at least at the beginning, anthropological or historical ambition to problematize the production of architecture in terms of its meaning. But of course, in the 70s, especially this rediscovery of type through the work of people like Aldo Rossi, and even before Saverio Muratori, became really a school of thought that was extremely influential in many schools in Germany, in Italy, in Switzerland. Actually, Rossi came to teach in Switzerland, ETH, in the early 70s. And in fact, type and typology became a very important meta-discourse at that time in those places. So what happened after? Because of course, Vidler wrote this article in the late 70s. So we can say that, and this is an hypothesis that perhaps we can also debate today, the fourth typology is exactly this return to typology that we have witnessed in the last 10 years. I in fact took this term from Chris' dissertation, PhD dissertation, which I had the honor to supervise. And the title of this was one of the first to really return, especially in the context of the Architectural Association, to the theory of type. In fact, I remember I started to teach exactly at the time at the AA. So we met, I think it was around 2006 or 2007. And I remember once I met Patrick Schumacher in the bar, because at the AA you meet everybody in the bar. And he came to me and said, you know, we have lost Chris to the idea of typology, because of course, for Patrick, this return of typology was opening a crack in the parametric front. And of course, you know, Patrick really has this almost army-like, you know, conception of a school. And in a way, Chris was the first to break the parametric front, and of course that was the beginning of the end for the parametric school at the AA. And in fact, Chris was really one of the first that I remember to really raise again the issue of type, but more or less at the same time also Christian Gantenbeid, parallel to their practice, started to research cities, actually mapping cities using again the concept of type. At that time, I thought that there was some sort of kinship of their work with, to a certain extent, a certain legacy of Rossi's teaching of type in the Swiss context, but that was my interpretation of your take on typology, that somehow this legacy resurfaced actually when you took this topic again. And so we consider this the fourth typology, which coincided also with a return to a kind of disciplinary idea of architecture, no? After the 90s and the early 2000s, where this kind of disciplinary identity of architecture was kind of lost in a way. So here then we arrive to the fifth typology, which is what we launch in this symposium. So the fifth typology, in a way, try to develop further the fourth typology. So one of the fundamental claims of the fifth typology, that the object of the architectural research is building. So building is an object of study that is really at the center of our work. But of course, we understood buildings as also indexes of social and political forces. And so we believe that type could be really a way to understand how buildings are produced, not only through the design of the architect, but also through the constraints, the norms, the policies, the forces, economic, political forces that, or ideological forces that produce architecture. And in a way, I would say the fifth typology is very similar to the fourth typology, but somehow we really emphasize how type could be a way to even further stress that architecture is always a product of social and political conditions that nevertheless becomes legible when it becomes a building, let's say a built landscape or a built structure. And of course, we put this as an hypothesis. So this hypothesis is open to debate, so we are not forcing on you this idea. You have accepted very kindly our invitation, but we want to make clear that, which doesn't mean that you subscribe, of course, automatically to the fifth typology. You can reject it, of course. But we believe that this could be really a topic of debate through your presentation. So I really hope that that will be the case. But I'm sure it will be also reading, anticipating the different presentations. So I'm really, really happy to have you. You will be introduced, of course, during the properly during the symposium, but I want to just introduce to all of you very, sorry, just I know all of you, but I just want to make sure that I don't make mistakes. The speakers of today, Brandon Carlin from the Architectural Association, our own Sophie Delay from EPFL. Sorry, I will just mention now the academic affiliation, but I will elaborate further in an individual presentation. Christoph Gantenbeid from ETH, from Basel, but teaching at Zurich ETH. Maria Sherazade Giudici from AA and RCA, AA London, RCA London, Marson Corby from EPFL, Christopher Siam Lee from GSD, Harvard, Enrica Mannelli from the AA, Gili Merina from TU Vienna, Davide Sacconi, RCA, AA, and Alfredo Tierman, who will join us in the afternoon as we speak. He's flying from New York, so I hope he will arrive in time and he will join us as well. So I think I have said everything in terms of introduction, so we can now move to the first speaker. So I'm really, really happy to introduce to you Gili Merina. Gili is an architect originally from Jerusalem, and she studied in Israel, but also in Germany, and of course at the AA, Architectural Association, where she studied in the History and Theory master program and later in the PhD program. She earned her PhD last year with a thesis on the architecture of pilgrimage, and especially Jerusalem really as an idea that in a way has been crucial for the development of pilgrimage in Western Christianity. Beside actually her work as a scholar and architect, Gili is also an amazing photographer, and I think her work as a photographer is really a very let's say crucial contribution to her work, but also to architecture in general. In fact, you will see in her presentation some of her photography, which was also part of her work in the PhD program. And Gili is going to open up the symposium with a very interesting topic, talking about the rotunda and the basilica, which are among the most important types of Western architecture, and she will tell us how they came into being and what they actually means. Thank you, Gili.